Om Uji Nide Niden Sam Pema Geza Dabolo Yazin Jige Nidimni Pema Jini Jisu Ram Kudu Karo Mambuku Jiji Jisu Damji Jinjin Lomji Jisu So Kuru Pema Siti Hong Hong Uji Nide Niden Sam Pema Geza Dabolo Yazin Jige Nidimni Pema Jini Jisu Ram Kudu Karo Mambuku Jiji Jisu Damji Jinjin Lomji Jisu So Kuru Pema Siti Hong Hong Uji Nide Niden Sam Pema Geza Dabolo Yazin Jige Nidimni Pema Jini Jisu Ram Kudu Karo Mambuku Jiji Jisu Damji Jinji Lobje Jesus Ho Guru Pema Siddhi Hom Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hom Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hom Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hom. Warm greetings, I'm Drakpa, rousing our Bodhicitta, tender-hearted, powerful love, compassion, and wisdom for all beings. May I be exactly what's helpful in all situations for all beings to have immediate happiness and long-lasting happiness and also freedom from all the ups and downs of samsara. So this kind of move to do just kind of a quick reflection on the main point of Dharma, of Buddha Dharma. What's the main point? Liberation, freedom. To actually come out of samsara, to uproot the samsaric habits I have in my mind, in my speech, in my body. To like completely undo this kind of like cyclical cycle. It's like ongoing experience of suffering, of dissatisfaction, and of replanting the causes for future suffering for myself and for those around me. To wake up, to be liberated, finally be free, enlightenment. This is the main point of Dharma, the main point of the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni, of Guru Rinpoche, and all the great masters. The liberation of self and others, to finally come out of samsara forever. It's the main point. So they say there's two benefits, benefiting self and others, both for immediate happiness and also for freedom, for enlightenment. So we're benefiting self and others, all beings, both for like the immediate kind of happiness and also for the ultimate, or the main point, for freedom from suffering and by removing the causes of suffering. So this is the main point. The secondary point is the happiness. What does this mean, happiness? In a kind of specific way, it means creating the supportive circumstances that bring about freedom. Like, so the main point is full awakening, the full turning on, the full brightening or natural settling into bodhicitta, heart, mind of enlightenment, our natural condition. Anything that helps us do this, each moment of our lives, is a supportive condition for our awakening, for our freedom, for our enlightenment. And that naturally brings happiness. The nature of Buddha nature and its experience of its cognition is happy. It's naturally self-satisfied or blissful. In Tibetan Buddhism, it talks about it's free of suffering. So any supportive condition, any practice, any skillful way of arranging a circumstance that makes it easier for the natural kind of result of freedom to happen, that's a secondary supportive condition, which can be talked about as kind of, in one way, happiness. So I just wanted to emphasize for myself, this is a main point. Like when Manjushri taught the 4 points of kind of releasing grasping to Sachin Kungan Ningpo, the first one is to, if we don't give up kind of endlessly kind of just trying to make this life better, we won't be a spiritual practitioner. We're just doing it for happiness, immediate happiness only. And this isn't Dharma. It's just worldly happiness. Buddha Dharma is about getting out of the cycles of happy, sad, up, down. It's like seeing the nature of those cycles, seeing the nature of the relational patterns we're in, actually being liberated from holding on to those patterns, those cycles, mainly for my own happiness. That's the cause. Ego clinging, self-cherishing, self-absorption, self-preoccupation. This, they say, the main demon or the main troublemaker, the main obstacle to ourselves is our self-absorption. Because we take an infinite field of cause, condition, and effect, we really strongly exaggerate just the me, my felt experience, me, mine, my mind, my body, my zone, my territory, my friends, my group. And in this way, like, we have this very small window of reality that we're kind of like constantly like centralizing everything into, me and mine. And this causes really big suffering. The root cause of suffering, self-absorption and activities based on self-absorption, or ego clinging and kind of this karmic mind. It's fundamentally distorted because it's not part of a seamless, fluid interconnectivity of cause, condition, and effect. It's always acting as if the entire field is just for this one node of the field, me. Liberation is when we stop unrealistically or mistakenly, like forcing everything to just point towards me, my way. So that's the main point. The great Shogyo Namkha Norbu Rinpoche, he really emphasizes so much in his teachings. The main point is liberation. Liberation for all beings. This natural wakefulness to actually recognize nature of mind. And that's why this higher level teachings, it's not even really talked about so much as liberation, because they say liberation can only happen if we're in prison. But when we look close enough, like in the second turning teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, we can see there is no such thing as samsara. It's like there is no such thing as nirvana. There is no such thing as me. There is no such thing as suffering. It's the beautiful genius and just kind of amazing non-dogmatic approach of the Buddha's teaching. That whenever he'd give a kind of a suite or an ecology of teachings, like the first turning, like the Four Noble Truths and 12 Links, for example. So the suffering, truth of suffering, the possible cessation of suffering, and the path to the cessation of suffering. This is a first turning, core bedrock first turning teachings. In the second turning, he systematically went through all these first turning teachings and refuted them. So this is not ultimately true. This is not the final way it is. So he went through the 12 links. There's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no mind, no body, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment, no path. He refuted all the 12 links. He refuted the 18 dhatus. He refuted the Four Noble Truths. He refuted the possibility of freedom because we were never in prison. So the great master, Omniscient Longchenpa, is saying the same thing in his profound seven treasury texts like Chüying. There's no such thing as liberation because we're naturally free. How can you free something that's already free? It makes no sense. And so at these higher level teachings or more integrated teachings, these more comprehensive teachings taught by the Buddha, second turning, into the third turning, into the fourth turning. The second turning is we're already free. It's like the nature of relationality is interdependent flexibility, interdependent communication, interdependent movement. It's like it's a constant, seamless, fully interconnected web that's inexhaustible. And when our heart is open like that, when our mind is flowing like that, when we have that clarity and that settled kind of relaxed kind of inclusion, connection, like where we're not obstructing it and blocking it all around me, when we just relax in our naturalness, then what happens? The third turning happens. Our Buddha nature starts to just shine out brilliantly, beautifully, as love and compassion and wisdom, as Bodhicitta. So we've already here established there's three different ways of talking about realization, or the main point of Buddhism. There's 3 different ways the Buddha taught this in the first, second, and third turning teaching. One, the main point is as a quality, free of suffering. That's a quality. My mind, when it's free of suffering, then that's cessation, freedom. Second, as a substance. You can talk about it kind of metaphorically as a substance, Buddha nature, third turning teaching. What is realization? What is freedom? Being, abiding in Buddha nature, relaxing in Buddha nature, allowing everything as your experience to arise as the expression of Buddha nature. That's talking about realization or freedom as a thing, as a substance. It's just a metaphor, you know. It's like having a metaphor of being a self that needs healing, and so then we can actually go to the doctor and take medicine. It's like if we believe in that story making, if we follow that train, kind of the delusion chain of like story making, storytelling, myth making, all that, like we like lock into a certain narrative, then like that's approximate relative truth. And we work with that metaphoric story, and like we look at it more closely and like have a more functional metaphor, more helpful metaphor, as like our mind gets more clear, as our heart gets more open, as we get more settled and relaxed into nature, natural awareness. Then the metaphors kind of like self-dissolve or self-compost into more inclusive metaphors. All these finger pointing at the moon. We get used to, you know, having a more helpful metaphor for ourselves and for others to like just see the moon. And what does that mean, seeing the moon? What does that mean, realization? Like seeing clearly? There's no moon. It's unfindable. Even the moon is just pointing towards another moon. It's all just pointing. Look closer, look closer, look closer. Look at the looker. Look at just awareness happening. Where is this all coming from? Really pinpoint it with accuracy. And then in the end, it's unfindable. That unfindability is a quality. But when we rest in that unfindability, that openness, the inexhaustible expanse without any fixed boundary, that's talked about as Buddha nature, substance. And then thirdly, when we actually relax and rest in that field of awareness, of enlightened awareness or wakefulness, or kind of undistracted non-meditation. There's different ways these great beings talk about it. That's talked about as a state of mind, a quality, a type of awareness, rigpa, or undistracted non-meditation, or fresh present wakefulness, or just natural condition. So whichever way of talking about realization is helpful. If it's helpful to talk about it as liberation, because I feel imprisoned, there's some suffering, it feels real, to escape, then use that metaphor. It's helpful to talk about it as a quality of just being free of all these ways of kind of constantly trapping, in framing my experience. Just like relax this framing addiction. Stop trying to box everything, Drakpa. Just ease up. Flow with it. Relax. Just like allow the quality of kind of relaxed, fresh, present, mindful, that quality, that crisp, vital, pristine quality to be there. And then just have the natural kind of expression of that quality pour out as Buddha nature and its outreaching, natural, compassionate activity. It's expression. As if it's this experience happening, as a thing, as something happening. If that's helpful, go for it. Or if it's just a fresh, open, quality or mode, this like kind of like pristine, vivid, crisp, clear, fresh, lucid wakefulness, if that state of mind, state not as something we enter, stay in, and exit, but as just the natural condition of mind. It's the way the mind is, the way the heart is, before it holds unrealistically. If that metaphor is helpful, then we go for it. The main point here is to actually be that, be in that, and from that way of being, we allow its natural function, its expression to happen. It outreaches as compassion just naturally because the nature of interdependence is further inclusion according to very specific patterned ways of including cause, condition, and effect. And to relax our holding patterns, this unrealistic ways of continually keep framing or boxing or like locking into a new story, a new metaphor, a new kind of trajectory. We keep kind of like falling for this storytelling of our sem, duality consciousness, the sixth consciousness. We keep believing in it. Because if it's, there's this fear, if I don't keep threading a narrative here, I'm like, what's going to happen, I'm going to just die. And that fundamental fear, like this drive of self-preservation, me kind of, continuing. He said these are the three qualities of samsaric or sentient mind, sentient awareness. A feeling of me continuing through time is the most important thing. These three qualities define what sentience is in Buddhism according to Mind Only School. Feeling of me continuing through time as the same me that's more important than everything else. This is called sentience. And a wisdom awareness doesn't do that. It doesn't lock into a sense of me and not me. It doesn't see that, fixed sense of me continuing through time. It's just always interdependently kind of like that dazzling, sparking experience of cause, condition, and effect, rapidly kind of like renewing all the time, like frames of a movie. Just so quick, like a flip book, old-time flip book. But if we look closely at each of those pages, it's not even a page. It's just this like habit to break things into discrete units, into some irreducible particles of mind, space, or time. It's just a habit, a way of holding metaphors, a way of holding onto things, reifying, right? So Buddhism is non-theistic. It says there's no thing there. There is no such thing as an entity. Outside, inside, in between, self, other, subject, object, inner subjective, inner objective. Like you look real closely for the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, they're not there. But we need the path of the three jewels in order to wake up, in order to realize that this is all just story making, it's all just myth making. Then we'd use whatever myth and story making, whatever way of expressing and communicating with others is helpful. Then we use that playfully, lightly, with a light touch, in a way that's actually helpful to align with the story making of someone else's world. How do they shape their world? What world are they kind of orbiting within? What's their world space, their world shaping kind of function? How is their mind, their heart kind of shaping their world? And then we see how we can kind of work with that, how we can be with that in supportive, nutritious ways. These are secondary conditions. Mutual benefit of self and others for immediate happiness. Why? So we can support each other, self and other, community, world, support it to abide in its natural, fresh wakefulness. So that's the main point. Buddhism isn't designed to just make this life better, happier, nicer. It's not designed to make samsara just more pleasurable. That's not the point of Buddha Dharma. It's not the main point. So see the nature of samsara. The nature of samsara is just samsaric mind. It's just a way of unrealistically fixating. And when we really directly deal with that fear, that if I stop storytelling in this way, if I stop fixating and holding and grasping in this way, then I'm going to just die. We stop doing that. Actually, what we find is vivid, fresh life, more fully happening. We find our Buddha nature. We found our natural wakefulness just flowing endlessly, powerfully, sensitively, skillfully, in touch, in contact, in communication, in community, with others. Full on, full threaded, expansive weave togetherness. Interdependence, dependent arising. So this is the main point. Liberation or freedom or natural wakefulness, undistracted non-meditation, whichever metaphor helps you. Everything that supports that and your situation with others in real time is a supportive secondary condition. Those secondary conditionings could be asana body postures, could be pranayama breath techniques, could be imaginal, visualization kind of holding patterns. It could be reciting prayers, supplicating the great lineage masters. It could be, not eating certain foods or getting regular sleep. Or there's the worldly and the non-worldly ways of creating more balance amongst the things that are aggregating. Amongst the things we're identifying with in our story making, there's ways of bringing them into more balance so they more clearly become self-aware. so that we naturally start to include more. And then when we include more, we see the more of the relationality of what we're including. If we're both wisdom to be spacious and compassion to include things with greater, more accurate detail, when we have these two functions happening, and then when it's a Buddhist path, wisdom and compassion in union, then that's kind of the trajectory. Well, the main point is to be fully interdependent. The supportive conditions, a secondary point, or anything that allow us to do that, specifically related to how we're stuck, how we're in closed loops, how we're in dysfunctional cycles, how we're just, believing in something that's not really true, that can be more true. It can include more detail, more granularity, more truth, more naturalness, more directly. And that's kind of the path of peace, path of awakening, path of enlightenment, which is the main point in Buddhism. So here the point isn't to escape the world. It's to see the world accurately. And when we look closer at the world, at ourselves and others, we recognize how amazing it is. How amazing interdependence is, how mysterious it is, how beautiful it is. How much we have to be grateful for. And the one thing that's going to give lasting freedom is really to continuously abide in that interdependence, in that mode, in that nature, the Buddha nature, in that freedom from characteristics. Whichever way we want to describe it, whatever model we want to use to describe it, to track it, to understand it, to use it to predict it, whichever model works. And the only thing that does that continuously is when we get onto Bodhisattva Bhumi, that layer, that level, where our that awareness, our Buddha nature, never turns off. It's self-knowing, never shuts down. The light switch doesn't go off. It stays on. That's what happens at the first Bhumi Bodhisattva level, which is an internal maturity. It's an internal level. It's like a way of stabilizing our meditation, stabilizing the realization in an uninterrupted fashion of the nature, of Buddha nature, of the unfindability of experience, of the natural union of heart and mind, of open mind, open heart. First Bhumi Bodhisattva, that's where Bodhicitta turns on and stays on. The Bhumi, or the level of utter joy, extreme joy. Finally, we have the clarity of mind. Then we see for ourselves and our mind, karma, we have karma, purifying karma. And finally, bing, the last karmic habit of self-preoccupation, of self-absorption is removed. And we realize we'll no longer make that mistake. We'll no longer inaccurately, mistakenly fixate and hold, unrealistically grasp. And all of a sudden, what an amazing moment of joy that must be. I'm out of making that mistake. And so it's just this continual naturalness would have the natural freedom beyond being trapped. The main point is finally actualized. We're in a continuous way of being that will never, shut down its self-knowing, its pristine, valid cognition. Unborn, unceasing by nature like the sky, experienced by self-reflexive awarenesses, discerning pristine cognition. Mother of the Buddhas, I pay homage to you. This is the great Prajnaparamita, the great middle way Madhyamaka, the great perfection, the great completion, the great seal. This is that moment. We see the true nature continuously, and then the path becomes having that expanse of open awareness be completely unblocked. So that's what these 10 Bhumi levels, the 10 layers of Bodhisattvahood. We're already recognize the empty freedom aspect of the nature of heart and mind. And now we're removing any way of these habitual tendencies to lock it, to hold it, to frame it in any way. And each level of the Bodhisattva Bhumi, we're removing these karmic obscurations, these stains or cognitive or emotional obscurations, these unrealistic ways of holding that are just like through our vehicle of our awareness, funneling through a vehicle, a body, that these certain habits are still there. Emotional habits to like orient towards me, cognitive habits to like hold anything, the hold that there's the existence of an outside, hold that there's an existence of time, that linearity happens, that there are such things as results. Like these are all cognitive obscurations. It's just a story. It's not the true definitive truth seen by the noble ones, the Aryas, who are like unsurpassed enlightened Buddhas. There's still these holding patterns, and so these bhumis were releasing these holding patterns until they're completely fundamentally removed, and that's called the great enlightenment or unsurpassed enlightenment. So the small enlightenment is called arhathood, where we're self-liberation. We no longer will experience suffering because we remove the causes of suffering. Then medium enlightenment is called bodhisattvahood. We enter the first bhumi, where we're no longer experience suffering because we no longer see that like there was ever a self there and there was ever an other there. We have the two emptinesses. We recognize the emptiness of what's it called? The emptiness of like subject and object. That's what happens in bodhisattvahood, like in the first bhumi. The subject is a sense of me, and like the kind of feeling that I'm this discrete succession of mind moments. Those are both, we see that that's not, those are just stories, not true. That's an unfindable story. We look close enough, oh, that's just like fake, artificial. It just removes, sense of me, the sense of me being composed of these discrete moments of mind. That's subject. Object is the sense of discrete units of space, discrete units of time. This is like the emptiness of phenomena. So emptiness of self and emptiness of phenomena, this is totally removed. The first bhumi bodhisattva level, we no longer have this holding, but we have this residual habits to still enclose our experience, the field of like unfindable vast expanse of mind, of awareness. We still have these habits to hold it as if it's a mind, to hold it as if it's a mind with others, to hold it as if it's a mind with others in worlds. Those are habits, stories, narratives. So the bhumis were releasing these habits. Why? What does that mean? It means we can be in any of those stories. We can elegantly take any role in any play, in any movie, according to what the movie is that someone else is in and believing in. That's the bodhisattva path. We can elegantly move between stories. We're not holding on to any one as if it's the final truth. This is the essential, like integral nature of awareness of bodhicitta, because we no longer privilege, like in any level, in any layer, in any line, in any type, in any state, in any kind of quadrant, we no longer hold or absolutize onto one part of it as being the real way. We don't reify like that. We see the emptiness of Buddha nature, and now we're like seeing the total flexibility of all the story making of Buddha nature, of all the relative expressions of Buddha nature. So we can elegantly move between the stories according to what's helpful for self and other, both immediately for our happiness and then more ultimately for the natural kind of freedom, the natural condition of the nature of others, the nature of self, the nature of outer phenomena, the nature of inner subjective kind of awareness. That's all kind of already been fine. Its natural condition is like, this is fine. That's what the Buddha taught. So this is the main point. To really not forget, liberation is the main point. And then Bodhisattva Sutra Mahayana, be getting on the Bodhisattva bhumis is the main point. And then more into Tantra level, the main point is recognizing that all the display in its nature is perfectly pure and utterly vast. There's unlimited great purity in union with great equality. And then Dzogchen, Mahamudra, it's the three kayas. It's always been Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. It's always been, this pure, it's always been the three samadhis pointed to in like the Mahayoga teachings. Suchness samadhi, all arising compassion samadhi, seed syllable kind of samadhi, everything of like mind, speech, body is all always been pure. And so Dzogchen points to that as karak, pure from the beginning. Always only ever been pure. There's no such thing as impurity arising. It's all pure. Like there is no distortion to remove. There is no samsara to escape. There is no nirvana to get. And like with every single thread of experience of any kind, of any story, it's all just wisdom happening in spacious, kind of like vast, expansive Dharma Dhatu. So in the field of Dharma Dhatu, the kind of more objective aspect, Dharmakaya, like the nature of pure mind, pure awareness, is limitlessly available in expressing. It's totally like the very kind of like fabric of the space. It's just boundless, substanceless, pure bodhicitta, pure love, pure compassion, pure wisdom, unrestricted, all scales, all levels, all lines of every single aspect of like relational experience is pure, naturally enlightened already. That's more this three kaya kind of realization. And for the great noble ones who are like fully abiding in that all the time, it's not like they're entering it as a state and they're in there for a little few minutes or a day. They're in that awareness, and they're seeing they no longer have to hold it in the story of like time and space. There's no one to enter this state and exit this state. There's nowhere to enter to. There's no destination. There's no origin. Like they're really in this all the time, in this way of being. They've practiced the path of becoming, of the path of like actually manifesting, maturing this realization, and like having liberation fully saturate every moment of their experience, like real Gadak, real pure from the beginning all the time. These noble ones who are totally free and they're uninterruptedly, that's continuous. The Tantra, they're like always natural. You can shapeshift however it needs to shapeshift for whatever is like mutually beneficial for self and all others, all beings. This is like what we're aiming for as Buddhists. This is the main point. It's not to be happy. It's not to have fame, fortune, repute, to be free of criticism. It's not this 8 worldly concerns. This is not a worldly Dharma path. So the ways we can approach Buddhism, the worldly way, I would use Buddhism to make my life better. That's a worldly approach. I use Buddhism to get a better, higher rebirth. That's a more subtle worldly approach. Sees there's 6 realms of beings and there's this beginning and an endless time, and I want to get a better rebirth. We're just still trying to get a better position in samsara. Then the third, I want to get out of samsara. I want to be free. Like this is so much like a pit of vipers. Like it's like totally everything is pervasive suffering. Conditioned existence, mind grasping mind is utterly kind of like vicious. I want to stop this cessation. That's like self-liberation. And then the fourth motivation is all beings. I want all beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. That's the Bodhicitta, Bodhisattva method, Bodhisattva approach. This is the approach. This fourth approach is mandatory for Vajrayana Buddhism. That's why so many masters are like in an expanse that Buddhism believes. It holds this cosmology, this story, this vast story of beginningless time, endless worlds, endless beings. Everywhere there is space, there's being, and everywhere there's a sentient mind, the sense of a me abiding in time is more special. Every time there's beings making that mistake, sentient beings, then there's just ongoing suffering. May I keep showing up for each of those beings to be exactly what's needed to like support them so they can relax and their all enlightened natural awareness can shine out perfectly, purely, uninterruptedly, continually, as it always is. But we're not seeing it. This is like the foundational approach of all of Tibetan Buddhism, of all of Vajrayana, Guya Mantra, or whatever you call it. Like this way of like using method, skillful means, of using, something like mantra or mind protection. We're using a way to like poise or arrange kind of causes and conditions auspiciously, our Buddha nature and the way we're holding it. We use that so that it naturally unfolds into its own undistracted non-meditation further. That's the point. It's called a union of skillful means and wisdom. We're using the skillful means, we're using our relative experience skillfully so that the wisdom, the natural innate wisdom of heart and mind is recognized. Discerning, pristine, valid cognition. We see clearly how our mind and heart is, how it's expressing, how it's communicating. That's the bedrock. Bodhicitta is the bedrock of using any of these secondary supports, like all these endless Tibetan Buddhist skillful means practices of using food or kind of sensuous pleasures or any activity of body and speech and mind, using that as a secondary condition to reignite our bodhicitta, to reignite our realization of conduct purity from the beginning. That's the union of skillful means and wisdom. This is kind of a definitive feature of the fourth turning, Tibetan Buddhism, or Vajrayana, which has nothing to do, honestly, with the place in Tibet. Like, that's what the great master omniscient Longchenpa said in his Treasury of Philosophical Systems. This is not just, this is, the Buddha taught the Vajrayana in India and before India in previous world systems. And it flourished in Tibet. What an amazing situation. That this whole kingdom, like, use so much of its resources just to like have such a profound education and enlightened technology to arrange causes and conditions skillfully so that the natural like condition of beings of like their Buddha nature would just be optimally supported to shine on all the time for the benefit of all beings throughout past, present, and future, and through all worlds. This is like what Tibet accomplished for centuries. Like, how amazing. This is so noble, like in going tracing back to the motherland like India. That these Aryas, these noble ones, Buddha Shakyamuni, and all these Arhats, like at that time, these great Mahasiddhas, like in India, like great Nalanda tradition, like Nalanda Monastic University, like such places have existed, such institutes of education, such wandering kind of yogis and yoginis have existed. And their teachings are still alive. They're still fresh, and they were preserved in places like Tibet, Bhutan, all these places that Buddhism went and spread. It's still alive, still uninterrupted, unbroken lineage system. We need to stabilize that. We need to have bodhicitta on all the time, because as we get into like more 21st century, kind of as these causes, conditions, and effects are interlacing more rapidly at larger scales, that the one thing that's always going to hold that to be for mutual benefit of self and others in the short term and in the long term, the one thing is bodhicitta. And we need to be in bodhicitta all the time. First booming bodhisattva. That's like the bare minimum where we kind of have to aim at this point if we have a bodhisattva kind of approach. The way of the bodhisattva for all beings to be free of suffering. That's the minimum lowest common denominator for a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, a Vajrayana practitioner, one who practices indestructible vehicle, sees the nature of reality as always the way it is. It's always pure from the beginning. Such beings have to like really get in the at least first booming bodhisattva. So we use things skillfully for benefit of self and others. That's why there's these hermitage, these Vajrayana hermitages that are designed as institutes or educational centers, education of heart and mind, specifically for the main point of liberation of self and others, to get onto the bodhisattva boomings where that bodhicitta will never waver. And then for the rest of infinite time and space, we will be like always abiding in emptiness, whether we're awake, dreaming, or deep sleep, in any world space that we're in any cosmic address, whatever you call it, in any way that our perspective shapes as this elegant combination of like infinite factors, we'll always have bodhicitta on. Heart, mind of enlightenment, courageous for the enlightenment of all beings. That is the main point. And once that's on, if we believe in such a cosmology, such a story, such a myth, if we believe in such an intergalactic, amazingly profound and vast myth, there are such things as bodhisattvas, there are such things as sentient beings, there is such a thing as samsara, there is such a thing as nirvana, there is a path. Like if we believe in these myths, that's like the best myth, the myth, the most integrated, comprehensive myth. Bodhicitta sees through the myth, through the veil. It's just a story, but it's the biggest story, most inclusive story. It includes all nightmares and all dreams and works according to their story making, always, uninterruptedly. And like now, it's not going to kind of ever forget. It's just a story. Always sees this dreamlike absolute quality. It's empty, fluid, open, interdependent, true nature quality. Is in that awareness. It's free of distorting it anymore. And that's on all the time. And that's what these hermitages are designed for, to have people accomplish that. So then no matter what body they take in the future, what language they speak, whether it's synthetic or digital or carbon-based or organic or inorganic, or they happen to be on Earth or some other planet, and then you open like the doors of the cosmology of Buddhism, the story making so vast of Buddhism, so much more refined than the kind of small little historical material, only just one little kind of corner of a sandbox people are willing to play with. Buddhism includes all the corners of all the sandboxes. Those are just stories, just much vaster story, much more view that includes systems of systems of systems. The only way to make sure that we're not going to use that vast and profound level of attunement, of sensitivity, alignment with cause, condition, and effect of all these interdependent systems, the only way we'll know that's only used for good is when bodhicitta is stably on all the time. First bhumi realization. That's the thing that will bind. So on the path, we're intentionally choosing to reactivate that, to re-enter, to re-engage, to re-brighten, to re-recognize that bodhicitta way of being, the nature of heart and mind. We keep choosing, we keep being willing to participate in that way of being until it no longer turns off. The holding patterns that shut it off, our bodhicitta has utterly evaporated them. And Vajrayana, the path of skillful means, does that very quickly because it uses these secondary supports of body and speech and the mind as well, uses the secondary supports very systematically so that it kind of is like a full system comprehensive approach to self-compost, to recognize this is a story, all these things are just stories, and then to elegantly move within and between stories whatever way is helpful for all beings. So that's why in terms of the practicality of Buddhism, the most practical thing is to get on the Bodhisattva bhumis and then to go through them as fast as possible. And then there's a lot of different, it's all based on a cosmology. We can't, do any path without a story, without assuming a cosmology that has ethics. It has mutually shared upon agreements of who's in the story, who are the players, what are the language, how does the language, what are the patterned ways of functioning, how does it work, what's the meaning that's agreed upon, what's the value set, what's the goal. We have to have these ways. We're always assuming these ways of any story we're in. Buddhism is consciously turning on this vast integrated story making capacity that elegantly moves between stories. To see the nature of it is always free of story. It's utterly empty of any fixed story, of any fixed entity, so that it can use every story for the benefit of self and others, now and forever into the future, for every single being. So, I wanted to say that really for myself. I mean, really, this bodhicitta, really recognizing and abiding in bodhicitta all the time is the main point. That's the main point. It's the most practical thing we can do. Whatever secondary support helps you do that, just, go for it. And 1 minute, 1 moment of mind and bodhicitta, a restful, wakeful, non-distracted meditation. We're not holding on to anything unrealistically. We're allowing our love and compassion and wisdom to just limitlessly, boundlessly be. This is so powerful, these moments. And these moments, become an ocean until we recognize they've always been the ocean. They've always been a part of an endless, inexhaustible, boundless ocean of bodhicitta, of all wisdom beings and their wisdom displays. This has always already been a Pure Land. And we recognize that. Wow, what a relief. And then we can very energetically, very enthusiastically engage all the different nightmaric visions. But to do that practically, so we don't get hurt by it, we really have to stabilize bodhicitta on all the time. That's the main point. So, thank you, friends. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. Precious bodhicitta, and those without it, may it be generated, and those who have it, may it never diminish, but always continue increasing. Deity, mantra, and dharmakaya are the nature of appearance, sound, and awareness, the pervasive kaya, wisdom display of the Buddhas. May practitioners of the profound and secret great perfection remain inseparable from the innermost, one-taste awareness of wisdom mind. Thank you.